this manager would only earn 10% because the size of his drawdown, in essence, was the same size of his return. Okay, it's not bad, he still demonstrated skill, but not a terribly high amount of skill according to his Netto number. Manager 2, instead of earning 400K incentive fees, he earned 600K incentive fees because he would qualify for a 30% return given his low max negative drawdown and his overall return relative to the risk budget. So you have two managers. One manager, based on his return per unit of risk, would qualify for a 10% incentive fee based on the Netto number. The other manager would qualify for a 30% incentive fee. And now you're truly not overpaying for beta, which is a huge problem out there when it comes time to evaluate if you want to make an investment in an alternative strategy. Okay, so here's that scale that I talked about. As you can see, that very low Netto number ends up with a 1, with a 2, with a 3, at a very low basis. And here's a little trick about this, which I'll get into as I talk about the risk budget and the unit of risk. I love the unit of risk because ultimately, this is how you define in advance what is being risked. When you ask the manager what their average drawdowns are, and they say, oh, I don't know, 5 to 15%. What the hell is that? Absolute return strategies must have absolute risk attached to them. This is not about passive investing. This is not about benchmarking. If you can't define what your risk is going into an investment, you're risking everything. So the unit of risk truly qualifies a manager. If I give Jason $3 million to manage a $3 million risk budget, and I give manager A over here a $1 million risk budget, there's a context that's different if one manager creates a $1 million return, another manager creates a $1 million return. And so this unit of risk helps define that flexibility premium that you have in that investment. And so that unit of risk to me is half of what goes into assessing that bottom line risk factor. Half of that talks about that. And so here's why that comes into key. When it comes to capacity, you run into a manager that's running $100 million. He tells you, well, what's your capacity constraint? Well, I think I could run $300 million. Well, now, with this incentive structure in place, he has to think long and hard because taking more assets from management, if he truly has a capacity-constrained strategy, is going to hurt him on the incentive side. Whereas right now, if I'm a manager with $100 million, okay, give me another $100 million, who cares? I'm under 20% incentive fee. Let's just see how far I can take this versus actually knowing how far or having to really think because you're incentivized now to only run your strategy at the true capacity with which it's supposed to be. Do I have an amen or do I have an amen?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Real quickly, who in here is an allocator by chance? Who does allocations? I see the traders. Excellent. Very good. So, the second part, max negative drawdown. It's not enough to determine how much the manager generates on that capital, but how much agony versus ecstasy they give you. We all know what that means, right? The agony-ecstasy ratio. That's pretty damn important. So, another thing I look at is max negative drawdown. That's different from max drawdown in the sense that it combines, it's like you look at a Sortino, which doesn't penalize you for upside standard deviation. Max negative drawdown doesn't penalize you for your upside, or your run from profit. So if I give a manager a $1 million risk budget, he makes $2 million right away, then loses back $500,000. He didn't come into my principal investment. So for the purpose of the Netto number, that counts as 0. He's not punished on the Netto number for a drawdown from profits because he's still in profits. It's only when he goes to a negative debit or to a debit on his risk budget that begins to come into play in terms of processing the Netto number. That's a very important distinction, and it encourages managers to, when they have their bets, because again, they're absolute return strategies, it balances off the capital that you give them from a risk budget versus the heat that they put you on to make those returns. So an example, again, we don't want to punish. The time period again is determined by the manager in advance, so the manager knows in advance what both his risk budget is and his negative drawdown, he can work with it. So the Netto number combines them both. As you see here, looking up here, we have the profits divided by the risk factor gives the Netto number. In this case, 100K divided by 750 gives you 0.133. That's not very good. So you end up getting, a 3% incentive fee from that. Now, looking at some more aspects of this, the Netto number pays from 1 to 50%. It can be re-tiered or recalibrated. I set this up for illustrational purposes. If you want to go 10 to 60, if you want to hurdle it, if you say, okay, if your Netto number is not above 0.10 or 0.5, you don't get paid an incentive fee. If your Netto number is not above 0.3, you don't get paid an incentive fee. Whatever the case may be, it's very flexible in how you can maneuver the risk factor. But what's different about the Netto number from most conventional methods is it incorporates a risk factor into the compensation metric. And you as the investor, based on the strategy, can define that risk factor for yourself based on your portfolio needs. Whew, saying a lot here. All right, looking at it again. So let's run through a couple of examples. The first one, which you're familiar with, 3%, guy makes $100,000, netto number 0.133 gets him paid 3%. As we progress here, the netto number ends up, at 0.50. 0.50 is worth 10%. That'd be $37,500. So you order 10% of the total profits. And we have this incremental, equitable scale that takes someone through that process. So as their return period of risk increases, so does their compensation. Amazing. We get down to where it starts to get interesting. I'm a manager. I run $5 million in AUM. Another manager runs $50 million in AUM. Because of this payout structure, I can potentially earn as much as the guy that runs 10x in AUM because I maximize the return period of risk. All of a sudden, I can truly now not punish myself, where I can operate, I can deliver alpha for the investor, not beta, okay? And I can still be paid commensurately with what I'm delivering. So example one with the netto number, $10 million risk, $10 million trading level, $2 million risk budget, or UOR. Go ahead, we have the account is $500,000 with $1 million max negative drawdown. Not particularly desirable, but let's just see how that plays out. I add those together to get the risk factor, so I add the max negative drawdown of $1 million, plus the UOR, the risk budget of $2 million, I get $3 million, divide that by 2, I get a $1.5 million risk factor. I take that $500,000, divide that by my $1.5 million risk factor, and that gives me 0.33. That 0.33 is your netto number, okay? We go and take that netto number, that 0.33, according to our last scale. That 0.33 here gives us a 7% incentive fee on that scale. Fine. I know where I stand, and I work from there. So it's much more equitable than the $100,000. So the manager now makes $35,000 instead of $100,000 based on the 20% incentive fee. So the investor can make that allocation, and instead of just pulling the capital at the end of it because you didn't perform, they're actually only paying commensurate for the alpha that was delivered to them. This truly sets up for you only paying for what you actually receive, versus I'll pay you now, I'll allocate more, I won't allocate more. It's very effective and useful in that regard. So the second example, I have a strategy up on Collective 2. Anyone in here familiar with Collective 2? It's a portal where people trade strategies. Okay. I posted a strategy starting February 11th on Collective 2. Started with a basic $250,000, $250,000, because I wanted to run this for the purpose of the book coming out later on this year. That is a third-party verification source. Not only do I live on my own P&L, and I have for several years now, I wanted to put my P&L out in public, at least in a hypothetical way, so someone could I could show people how I execute the markets. The strategy started with $250,000, and almost 4 months, it's up close to 24% before commissions, 16% after commissions over the last 4 months. And I put a $50,000 risk budget on it. So that gives you a sense of where that's at. Right now, the annual return is projected at 65%. The annual return without commissions is projected at 112%. And max drawdown had 13.6%. The max negative drawdown was about 7% because it's from into profits. So here's how this would play out. I add all these numbers together, and I end up, if we play this out for the rest of the year, I'd have a netto number of 4.84. The account would make $160,000. My incentive fee with a 4.84 netto number would be 50%. The investor would also get 50% of the profits, obviously because it's split at 50-50. So it would be $80,000 return to the investor on a $50,000 risk budget. That's very important. So even after those payouts, because I maximize, or the example maximize return period of risk hypothetically here so well, the return over risk budget for the investor is still exemplary. And that's what happens with this payout scale, that the more you pay a manager, it's truly goal congruent. You truly have a goal congruent structure in place. The more the manager makes, the more you make, and you're truly receiving alpha, not overpaying for beta. So, as revolutionary as this idea is, how the hell will this ever get put into place? Well, I see 3 phases. The first phase is that after the book comes out and speeches like this, people will use it to compare the current compensation structure they have. Well, the current manager I have has a netto number of 0.10, and I'm paying him 20%. I need to either reduce my allocation or go from there, or better yet, the manager should be getting paid 30%, but only paying him 20%. So you can use the netto number as a way to ascertain if you're receiving value from the hedge fund you're investing in or not. That's a very practical early implementation way right there. The second phase is a smaller fund level, medium fund level, where people actually have capacity to take on more strategy, and they don't necessarily want to increase capacity and hurt their returns, but they want to maximize return period risk and know they have the skill to do that, they'll take on this compensation structure as well. And the last is, of course, the people that live on beta and AUM. There'll be so much industry uproar in 4 years from now and 5 years from now that they will be required to, if not this metric, have a metric that holds them accountable to how well they're maximizing return period of risk. In conclusion, I think the biggest thing that's probably going to resist this is education. This factor takes about 5 seconds more to compute than the traditional compensation structure. That could be a barrier as well. And the paradox is most investors, ironically, may be against paying someone 50%, even if it means them getting a net higher value, and even if it's only retroactive. Because the pension funds, the endowments, the boards that take 9 months to a year to decide to make an investment, like, we can't pay that manager 50%, my God. Well, would you rather pay manager A 20%, who puts you through a ton of freaking drawdown, or manager B 50%, who puts you through no drawdown and made you a bunch of money? Well, we can't pay 50%. Remember myth number 2, money doesn't always find its most efficient home? That's what I'm talking about. So, the adoption of the Netto number, I think, can show that we as an industry can innovate and regulate and educate ourselves. Innovation and education is stronger than regulation. And people talk about, do hedge funds define value? This is one metric where we can prove, put our money where our mouth is, and we can define our value as a hedge fund and as people out there. I would say again, the profits of the book are going to support military veterans, and wounded veterans are coming back as a passionate cause of mine. I was a Marine for 9 years, and I encourage you all, when the book is up, to buy a copy of it, or donate to some veteran charity out there, because they serve for us and they put their lives on the line for us. Thank you very much.